As a result, rising pension costs, particularly debt service costs on the pension debt, are now straining state and local budgets. Services have been cut. Workers have been forced to endure benefit cuts, wage freezes, and job reductions. I would put to you that when the state runs up an unfunded liability, it's not taxpayers who bear the most of the burden, it is workers. They bear it through wage freezes, they bear it through benefit cuts, both of which have happened in the state of Pennsylvania. There was discussion of the Act 120 new tier that was put in place. It's 3% normal cost. That 3% normal cost is quite low. It is quite low because the benefits are pretty terrible for most employees. The cost is low because most employees never make it to retirement under that system. And so we place most people who enter public school employment, teachers, your principals, on an insecure retirement savings path. They turn over before they ever get there. They don't have enough savings, and we're counting on their next job to make up the difference. The 3% is low because it is a bad pension plan. People on both the right and the left have recognized the urgent need for reform, and we are interested in working with all who are pursuing reforms that are comprehensive, lasting, and fair. By taking steps to address the issue today, we can avoid a crisis tomorrow. So I've got a couple of paragraphs here that I'm going to skip over that say what pension reform should accomplish. I'm not going to read those. I think that there are two primary things that you have to focus on. One is paying down the pension debt. The state owes public employees a significant amount of money, and they have to pay that. You're not going to be able to avoid it. There is no silver bullet. You have to pay for benefits that have been promised, and the state needs to adopt a reasonable, responsible funding plan on that debt as soon as possible, and that plan should pay down the pension debt as quickly as possible. The second issue, the state should consider putting in place a retirement plan that modernizes the pension system for today's workforce, for a workforce that is more mobile than it has been in the past, and also improves the political economy issues, the holding government accountable for making responsible contribution issue. The second false critique raised by reform opponents is transition cost. It has been perpetuated by the cottage industry of actuarial and investment consultants who work for retirement plans. The cost that would supposedly result from a transition to DC are a product of incomplete cost comparisons based on poorly justified methodological choices and assumptions. The two transition cost claims that have been raised in Pennsylvania are the state must pay off the pension debt on an accelerated schedule if the existing plan is closed, and two, winding down the system would require more conservative liquid investments over time. So I'm going to skip over the GASB paragraph. I don't think that right now it's being advanced that GASB would require an acceleration. But it's important to realize that moving new employees to a new system wouldn't really change anything for the current system, for the legacy system. The pension debt is the sole responsibility of the sponsoring government. Employees don't pay down the pension debt. That's your responsibility. Just like any other debt of the state, you have to have a payment plan, you have to stick with it, and it has to be adequate. It is up to the government to adhere to a prudent payment policy for the pension debt. In the end, a state's choice of amortization schedules must match the duration of the debt. The way that the state chooses to pay down the debt service is a matter of public policy over which you have complete control. The previous analysis did not present an empirical justification for accelerating the amortization schedule. Regardless of any proposed change in the plan design for new employees, it is imperative that Pennsylvania adopt a responsible, sustainable pension debt repayment schedule that is consistent with the recommendations of the Society of Actuaries Blue Ribbon Panel on Plan Funding. I would recommend that the members of the committee look up the Society of Actuaries Blue Ribbon Panel on pension plan funding. I think that the state of Pennsylvania would do well to adopt all of the recommendations of the panel. On amortization, they recommended amortization schedules that were closed and no longer than 15 or 20 years. So shorter than what Pennsylvania has today. If Pennsylvania adopted such a recommendation, there would be absolutely no need to accelerate the pension debt repayment schedule because the duration of that debt would be shorter than the duration of the liabilities. Second transition cost claim, which I think Milliman dealt with quite well, is that over time you would have to move to a lower discount rate because you would have to shift to more conservative, more liquid investments. The key point here is that the actuaries simply, in their previous analyses, simply assumed that they would have to move very aggressively to a lower discount rate. In fact, moving to a discount rate that would result in the plan investing essentially at the risk-free rate. This was an assumption. It was not backed up with any empirical evidence. There was no justification for that change. It was purely an assumption. When Milliman looked at this, there was the empirical results of their study show that there was no greater liquidity concern in the future over the projection period than there was today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not most, all companies want to earn a profit. Companies usually make decisions to do things in a more cost-effective way. So over the years, almost all the Fortune 500 companies have switched from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan for new employees. Most smaller companies have done the same thing. Have you done any research? Are you familiar with any Fortune 500 companies that have switched back to a defined benefit pension plan because they found transition costs going to a defined contribution plan were too much? Do you have any knowledge of small businesses canceling their 401k plan and move into a defined benefit pension plan?
I have no knowledge of a private sector employer that has moved from defined contribution to defined benefit, and I also have no knowledge of any transition costs that have been experienced in the public or the private sector.
I've tried to research it. I've never been able to find anything. I just wondered if you have, because it seems like if it's expensive to switch from a defined benefit to a defined contribution plan, it seems like companies would be scrambling to go back to the good old days when they had a lower cost defined benefit plan. Well, from what I've seen, and I guess from what you've seen, that's not the case. So I think that's almost proof that there is no such thing as a high transition cost. Otherwise, companies wouldn't continue to get rid of defined benefit plans, and companies that already did, they'd be moving back that model.
Yes, I think that's accurate. I think to put a finer point on this, I think that one of the big pushes for the private sector moving to defined contribution plans is similar bad behavior that's happened in the public sector. Through the 80s and 90s, corporate raters viewed overfunding as an asset of the company. They took those assets and used them in merger and acquisitions. Companies underfunded benefits, and there was a trend of cut, 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 eliminate. And right now, one of the biggest problems that we face in the private sector is not that there are 401ks. That is not the biggest problem. One of the biggest problems is people are undersaving. Contribution rates just aren't high enough. That would be a problem. That's going to be a problem in your current Act 120 plan. Contribution rates, 3% is not enough to save for retirement. There's no magic formula, no magic black box that you could put 3% in and expect a reasonable retirement out.